leave, they put on clothes because they realize now what happened between the two of them. They hide from God. And their whole world's become disordered. And we understand that because we live in that reality every day, right? Which is why, do you see why we have the disciplines of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving? Is because that's exactly what they do, is they bring healing into the places that were broken. Because like we said, Christianity is not sin management. It's not behavior management. But the grace that Christ gives us the grace to overcome and to live fully alive. So that's God's heart for us. So we talk about prayers healing our relationship with God, fasting healing our relationship within ourselves, and almsgiving healing our relationships with one another. Because when that happens, then the grace comes forth. Because Christ comes to set us free, He's redeemed everything. And we heard that on Ash Wednesday. We heard that in the beginning of Lent, that Christ suffers in the desert. He took on every single one of our temptations and was victorious. Every single one. Every single one. He's a man like us in all things but sin. His love for us, it's just so overwhelming. It's just so overwhelmingly beautiful. So He comes to heal us, okay? Because what happens, we know that Adam and Eve, they have to leave the garden, right? So they leave the garden and they spend time in the wilderness after that. And so God goes on a search and rescue mission. And so even we know from the book of Genesis chapter 3:15, we call it the proto-evangelium, that God begins to speak of a Savior. God begins to speak of a Redeemer, okay? But what happens is they begin to, because they suffer, and because the suffering is continually, being passed on and passed on and passed on, we see that from generation to generation to generation, that many times what's passed on is deep sorrow. And there's a wonderful saying in healing circles that says this: suffering that is not transformed is transmitted. Suffering that is not transformed is transmitted. Which means that anything that has happened in our life, my dear friends, that God is not transformed in our life, that hasn't been open to the grace of God, that hasn't allowed His grace to penetrate where the emotions come out, the truth comes out, and the light comes in. Those things in our life, those sorrowful chapters, those are especially the places that Satan loves to attack us in. Those things don't just go away. Usually what we do is we just transmit that pain, we transmit that suffering onto our spouses. We transmit it onto our co-workers, we transmit it onto our grandchildren, we transmit it onto the people at the parish. And we're seeing that, like we talked about, we're seeing that in the church today. The suffering that is just being transmitted onto the next generation, It's like this ripple effect of immense brokenness. So what happens in our life, right, where God comes to interrupt that? He comes to interrupt that with His truth and His goodness and His beauty. I think one of the most profound experiences I had of this saying, actually being true and then actually being redeemed, was when I did run a daycare for a long time. Like I mentioned, I played Division I volleyball in college. I wanted to work for ESPN. I had a life that I wanted for myself. I did not want to be a teacher in school. So I didn't major in education on purpose. And that was on purpose, people. I'm not kidding. I did not want to work with little kids. I'm like, what am I going to do with little kids? So I was sent to Seattle to start a mission. And God's like, I'm going to put you in charge of a daycare for 8 years. I'm like, I don't think that's a very good idea. If you're asking me, I don't think that's a very good idea. I don't know what to do with little kids. What am I going to do? He's like, oh, you're going to be fine. I don't know about this, man. This will get pretty ugly. But I am very type A, and I can follow a schedule like a champ. Let me just tell you that right now. And I can maintain order, people. Okay, so I talked to the person who ran the daycare for years before me, and I'm like, so what do you do? Because I'm the youngest in my family. I have an older brother, but I was kind of raised like an only child. I didn't babysit as a kid. I played sports and read books, and so I didn't really have a lot of experience with little kids. And I don't even, what do you do with 30 little kids after school every day? I don't know. So I got the schedule. I looked at the schedule. It's like, we can do that. I can follow that schedule. Okay, so we're going to maintain order, and we're going to do it well. Thank you very much. Okay, so 3 o'clock, school gets out, and the kids come into the daycare room, and you will hang up your backpack in the closet, and there will be no jackets on the floor. Thank you very much. Okay, so you will come back into the room, and you will put the Barbie's head back on the Barbie because you ripped it off. So put the Barbie's head back on the Barbie. At 3:15, we will have a snack, and there will be no punching each other in line. It will be single file line with no talking. Okay? You will go to the cafeteria, and you will pull your chair out, and you will not smash goldfish on the floor or leave apple juice on the table. You can imagine how well that went over. Okay, so, but I meant well. Man, I meant well. Okay? I had no idea that in my zeal to maintain order, which you do have to maintain order, I had no idea how I was coming was just trying to maintain order. With 30 kids, it is like mob control at certain points, okay? But I did know this. I would get so frustrated with the kids at times that after daycare, I would still be at home like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I'd still be awake, like thinking about what happened at daycare that day, and thinking to myself, man, when I see that mom tomorrow, I'm going to tell her exactly what that kid said. And I thought of like 4 different ways I could tell that mom about that whole thing, and I'm frustrated. Okay, so I'm resentful. I'm frustrated. That kid is at home watching Peppa Pig. They could care less. Okay, they don't care at all. But I'm angry about it. I could tell like with my confrontations with the kids that just we were not getting along. But I just had to maintain order. Okay, because part of that was an echo of my own childhood. It hadn't been redeemed. It hadn't been redeemed until one day, God sent my favorite little girl to tell me the truth, what was really happening. Okay, and He did that on purpose because if He would have sent one of the snarky little kids, I wouldn't have listened to him. But He sent my favorite sweet little girl. And so one day we're at the daycare and we're talking, and I'm standing here, and there's another sister standing here, and the sweet little girl, she's 7 years old with big brown eyes, she's standing here, and we're talking about Beauty and the Beast. And we're talking about Belle and Gaston and the whole provincial life, and just talking about the whole story. And the sister standing here, she points to me and she says to the little girl, "Oh, Sister Miriam, she's the beauty, I'm the beast, huh?" And that little girl looked up at me with her big brown eyes and she said, "Actually, Sister Miriam is the beast." And in that moment, a little arrow just came up her sweet little lips and it just pierced my soul to the core. And Mother Teresa says that anytime anybody says anything about you, go to Jesus and ask him if it's true. So I survived daycare that day. And I went home to our chapel across the parking lot. And the first thing I did is I knelt right in front of the tabernacle and I said, "Is that true? Is that true? Have I really become a beast? Like in my zeal to maintain order, is this what I've become?" And I can tell you honestly, my dear friends, that it was partly true. It was partly true. Because see, I did not have the humility at the time to admit that I was not in my head. I did not have the humility to go to the principal and say, "I need help here. I've never run a daycare. I don't know what to do." Like I didn't have the humility to listen to what the kids were trying to tell me. I was just going to maintain order and I was going to do it very well, okay? And something had to change. And I wish I could tell you that it was like a St. Paul moment where I fell on the ground and woke up and everything was totally different. But something happened that day. And I realized that I had to let Jesus come into parts of my own heart, part of my own story that needed to be redeemed. Because like I said, it was some of the echoes of my own childhood. It was just some things that were being played out in my life that had been playing out for a very long time. And I had to let God come and redeem that. And it was slowly but surely, you know what, things changed. And you know what, sometimes there was goldfish on the floor and kids left jackets on the playground and nobody died, okay? Nobody died. And the daycare was a lot better. One of the things, I can tell you this, that kept me struggling with this for so long, one of the things that kept suffering not being transformed in my life, but being transmitted into my life, and transmitted from my life to other people in my life, were deep areas of unforgiveness. Right? C.S. Lewis says this, I love it. He says, everyone says forgiveness is a lovely idea until they have something to forgive, right? Have you ever had somebody come and tell you a story and you're like, "Oh girl, you should forgive her," and then somebody comes into your life and you're like, "Well, you don't understand the situation." You're like, "What? I'm sorry, what'd you say?" You know? It's hard, isn't it? Why is it that forgiveness is at the heart of the Our Father? Of all the things that Jesus could say when his disciples say, "Hey, teach us how to pray," at the heart of that prayer is what? Forgive us our trespasses as... That is a very serious thing to say. That is a very serious thing to say. And during Pope Francis's Year of Mercy, I was reading a book on mercy. I give talks on mercy extensively throughout the year. I was reading a book on mercy, and this woman was quoting a priest. Now, this is anecdotal, so you can take it for what it's worth. But I've been working in a healing ministry for a long time now, and I see it in my life, I see it in the lives of other people, and I think it's true. So he said this, when he was ordained and sent to a parish, he said he thought about 50% of his parishioners, about half of their spiritual, emotional, physical, and psychological illnesses had to do with areas of unforgiveness in their life. It's like maybe half, okay? Then he said, after 10 years of hearing confessions and doing healing ministry and visiting the sick and visiting families, he thought that maybe 75% of his parishioners, their emotional, spiritual, physical, and psychological illnesses had to do with areas of unforgiveness in their life. And then he said this, and He said, after 20 years of being a priest, after 20 years of being a priest, of hearing confessions, of doing all that, it's his opinion, and I believe it, he said 90% of people's psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical illnesses have to do with areas of unforgiveness in their life. Because what unforgiveness does is unforgiveness keeps us locked into these huge areas of pain in our life. And I think one of the reasons why we don't want to forgive is because it can be incredibly painful, and it survives under the illusion of self-protection. How many of us in our life had somebody hurt you, and you've said to yourself, it's actually called an inner vow, where you say to yourself, or you say to that person, I will never trust you again. I will never trust you. I will never be vulnerable. I will never believe what people say. I will never let anybody close to me. All those things, what they do is they create this hard shell around our heart. And it doesn't stop God's love from giving. He doesn't stop God from giving his love to us. Oh, but it stops us from accepting it. And we exist under these conditions around our heart, where these hard areas of our heart is around our heart. And so what Jesus is asking us to do is asking us not to just do behavior modification. He's actually asking us to go to the core and to be transformed. So here's what it might look like in your life and my life. This is what happens, okay? So what happens in life? Somebody hurts us unjustly. So maybe it happened to you today. Maybe your spouse said something to you that was just unkind. It was just not necessary. It was just unkind. And that's not fair, okay? So it's somebody that hurts us unjustly. So forgiveness, Aquinas will tell us, has to do with the area of justice, like the virtue of justice, of owing to somebody what's due to them, okay? So what happens? Who is it? It's typically somebody who should have been better to you. So there's a difference between somebody cutting you off on the freeway and then somebody in your house saying something to you that's very unkind. Like the difference between the two is large. So typically somebody who should have been better to you. And how is the hurt usually manifested? It's usually manifested in areas of love withheld or love withdrawn. So we can kind of give the example of, say, your spouse this morning saying something to you that wasn't kind, okay, that was maybe hurtful. But we also have areas, maybe that's a pattern, which hits on deep areas, but a lot of us have patterns that happened when we were very, very young. Okay? So many of us, all of us, have certain areas of our life where our foundation has been wounded by some very deep areas of pain. And a lot of times that comes from parents. That comes from siblings. That comes from being picked on at school. It comes from areas of abuse, areas of trauma. Okay? And these things go very deep in our hearts. And so what happens from this? Okay, this happens to all of us. So all of us experience this to greater or lesser degrees. So what is the chain reaction from this? The chain reaction, the first thing is sorrow, that it hurts us. And as it should, because it's not fair. Okay, so usually what happens at the beginning is it hurts us. And what happens is anger arises from that. So anger is a secondary emotion. It's a good and healthy emotion. Anger is actually given to us to right what is wrong. So usually our first response is this: how dare they do that? They owe me. And in a sense, right, they do, because they did something to you that was unjust. So anger is about something unjust. Up until this point, this is totally healthy. Okay? This is totally healthy. So very few of us had parents where when you were a little kid and say you came home from school and somebody was really mean to you on the playground. Few of us had parents when you came home from school where they said, what happened today? And you're like, oh, Mom, Bob was mean to me on the playground. And they sat down and they're like, well, tell me what happened. All right, what are the lies you believe about yourself? What do you think God is trying to tell you? I mean, very few of us had parents that could do that with us. So what happens, especially when the trauma is even not in the playground, the trauma is at home, is that we start to create ways to survive. Because as children, we're very smart, we learn how to survive. So what happens is when anger is not about righting something that is wrong, anger goes inward and it becomes destructive, or it goes outward and becomes destructive. So those things that have happened to us, my dear friends, that are still in our hearts, many times it turns into areas of resentment. It turns into stewing, like Peppa Pig in the daycare. Okay, this is totally me right here. It is grudges. The things where when you see somebody, you can't stand to be in their presence, or there's something in your life that they've done that you can't let go of. It leads to vengeance, where you seek to take revenge against them, either covertly or overtly, passive-aggressively, or just flat-out aggressively. And it turns to hatred. So deep, not just feelings of hatred or feelings of sorrow, but a hardening of our will, where we actually come to hate somebody. And that creates is he's planting lies into our pain. So not only is the pain bad enough, he is speaking lies into our pain. And usually these lies have things to do like where we say I'm not loved. I'm ugly, I don't belong, I'm all alone, nobody sees me, nobody listens to me. If you want to know what some of your lies are, the next time something happens to you, pay attention to what happens right in here. The stories, the tapes that go on in your head. Because I could probably guarantee you that they're old stories. Because the foundations go deep. So maybe for you, it's like, I can't do anything right. I can't see, she said that to me, I can't do anything right. And that might be something that's happening here, but that has a long root to when you were maybe a little kid, where dad was like, what's wrong with you, man? Well, you can't do anything right. Do you see how that works? So the pain and sorrow in our life that's being constantly triggered at this level actually has some very, very, very deep roots. So what happens here is that Jesus leads us through a path, okay, of not behavior management, of not pretending these things don't exist, but actually what we do, and it's a lifelong process, of going into these very places that are often very scary for us, and encountering them with the Lord, and allowing Him to speak the truth in them. I can tell you very honestly that one of the things, like I said, that kept me sick for so long was that I had a massive, massive misunderstanding of what forgiveness was. I've had to have a lot of words rehabilitated in my life, and a lot of terms, and one of them is forgiveness, because for a long time I thought that if I forgive you, I'm just going to let you off the hook. And you can't be let off the hook, thank you very much. Like, whenever I say I'm going to remind you that I haven't forgotten what you did, thank you, okay, you know? Because I didn't understand what forgiveness was. Because there's some things in life, you know, we have a silly saying in English that says, forgive and forget. Just get over it. What's your problem? Just get over it, you know? And sometimes people even use Bible passages where St. Paul says, you know, just forget what's behind you, press forward to the past, or press forward to the future. Which is fine, but for 99% of us, our past is being played out in our present, right? We can't forget. Actually, the Catechism says, it's fascinating, he says we don't even have the intellectual capability to forget. But through forgiveness, through mercy, our memories are transformed, not from forgetting or from seeking revenge, but our memories are transformed into intercession for the ones who have hurt us. What if God allowed in your life, whatever He's allowed in your life, for the sole purpose that one day you would pray for the person who hurt you the most? People ask me all the time. They say, what's one thing I can do for Lent? What's one thing I can really do for Lent? And I said, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. I said, pray every day for the person who's hurt you the most. And see what happens to you on Easter Sunday. See what happens to you. Because forgiveness is not just saying that, you know, it doesn't matter, it's okay, that is not what forgiveness is. Because Christ shows us what forgiveness is by hanging on the cross. So forgiveness is a grace, right, and a mercy from God. It is the willingness to take a full account of the offender, right, to pardon the offender, to release your grasp on them, and commend the person to God, asking God to take care of the situation. It is the willingness to be willing to receive and offer healing and freedom. And when Jesus is stripped naked, I hope you know that. I hope I'm not surprising you, but the Romans, before they crucified you, one of the last things they would do is they would strip you naked to completely humiliate you. You were indeed scourged right up until you are about to die, but they wouldn't give you the luxury of dying. They would keep you alive. They would put the beam of the cross on your back. You would march through town with your crime around your neck while people spit at you, they cussed you out, they mocked you. They brought you out to the place of crucifixion. The place of crucifixion was not some place way out in the countryside. It was outside of the city walls, but it was it was on the main highway. As a lesson to anybody who comes to Jerusalem that it's the Romans who ruled here, and if you disobey us, this is what will happen to you. They use fear as a very powerful motivator. Fear is a very powerful motivator. And one of the last things they did before they crucified you, which only slaves and rebels were crucified, it was the most disgusting way to die. Roman citizens were too dignified to be crucified. St. Paul was beheaded. He was a Roman citizen. Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of the universe, suffers the most horrendous, humiliating death possible by being crucified. It was reserved for the lowest of the low, slaves and rebels. And what they would do before they crucified you is they stripped you totally naked. His heart is vulnerable. Somebody was talking to me about a book they're reading about vulnerability, and the author of the book says, we talk about being vulnerable. He said, you know what? We don't have to be vulnerable. He said, actually, our natural state as human beings is vulnerability. And Christ, one of my spiritual directors from a retreat I had this summer, he said, Christ is showing us in his nakedness, in his openness, in his strength, in his purity. He said, Sister Mary, he's teaching you how to be human. Because we're used to self-protection, we're used to self-reliance, we're used to excusing ourselves, to facades that we to put on to impress other people. Jesus had none of them. None of them. He was authentic as can be. And he hangs upon the cross, and what happens? And I'm not making light of this whatsoever. He hangs upon the cross, and people are still reviling him, still spitting upon him, still making fun of him. And who does he have in his heart and his mind as he hangs over you and me? Taking on every one of our sins. In his heart, his body's torn open, he's naked, and he's the bridegroom pouring out for the bride. That's what a man does. A man sacrifices his life so his bride can live. And his heart is what? Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So the grace to forgive, my dear friends, isn't something you and I can do on our own. It's impossible. But it comes from God who freely gives it to us, if we'd be willing to receive it first. So let me ask you this. It's the same question that Jesus asks the paralytic today from the gospel. He says, do you want to be well? Do you want to be well? And I think in my life I have some kind of varied reactions, because when Jesus comes into my life and he says, do you want to be well? There's part of me that's like, yes, Lord, I want to be well. I'm in it to win it. Like, go big or go home. Like, let's do this thing. Like just do the whole thing, right? Yes. But then if I'm really honest with myself, there's other parts of my heart where he says, do you want to be well? And I'm like, can I think about that and get back to you? Because I like my little resentment. I like that. I'm not quite ready to give that up yet. I'm not quite ready to give up my self-indulgence here. So if you could just get back to me in a couple weeks, I'll talk to you about that again, I'm not quite ready to change yet. I'd like to complain just a little bit more about something. Could you just, let's just wait a second, If we could just give up complaining for Lent, let's try that. How would that be working for us? You know what I'm saying? Oh my gosh. But Jesus says, do you want to be well? Do you want to be well? And I think for all of us, a deeper step to being well, my dear friends, is to allowing his mercy to come and transform us. Because like the suffering that we have not allowed to be transformed has a ripple effect of destruction, every suffering that we have allowed to be transformed has a ripple effect of grace. That every time in your life when you say yes to the Lord, every time you go to confession, every time you receive his merciful love here, every time you allow his love to triumph in your life, what comes forth from your life is grace. It comes beauty, it's strength. And that is what changes the world. The stuff that saints are made of is not just in your stained glass windows, your beautiful stained glass windows here. But the stuff that saints are made of is not just in the stained glass windows. The stuff that saints are made of is sitting here tonight. It's you. It's your story. It's in every chapter of your story. It's not you, if only this wouldn't have happened to me. It's you with this happening to you. Yes, that God comes into your life to transform you. And like we said, since God lives outside of time, there's nothing in your life that maybe you're thinking of it right now. Maybe you're thinking of it right now, the situation in your life that is hurting you the most. And you're saying to yourself, can it really be healed? And I'm telling you, yes, it can. Yes. And sometimes it happens instantaneously, like the widow's son raised from the dead. And sometimes it happens little by little by little by little. But Jesus Christ did not come to earth and suffer and die for us